well with us on the latest edition of ESPN FC Live. We've got Rob Dawson, Janusz, Michallik. I'm Kay Murray, your host. We're going to be looking back on that classic between Manchester United and Liverpool in the FA Cup at the weekend. We are still talking about it. We know you lot all still are. And we're going to be talking about Barca's upturn. Their fortunes have changed somewhat. Lewandowski's back on fire, it seems. So we'll go there a little bit later in the show. But let's start, guys, with that game at Old Trafford. Rob, you were there, so let me come to you first, because I just want to talk about how it's gone down in Manchester, this result. And is the excitement still palpable right now today? Because it does feel as though everybody's still so excited about it, still talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. And you said it right in your intro there, that it's an instant classic and probably will be spoken about for years to come. It feels like that kind of game, that kind of result. Obviously a massive moment for Man United in their season, not only to beat their rivals Liverpool in the manner that they did, but obviously keeps alive their hopes of a trophy this season as well. You know, the game sort of swung back and forth so many times. It looked like Liverpool were going to win, having gone ahead twice, and then to win it as they did in the last minute of extra time with a goal like that. You know, people are still talking about it 48 hours later. They're probably going to be still talking about it in 15 or 20 years' time. It was that kind of game.
What about you, Janusz? What are you thinking? I see you smiling there. And I just wonder if you think they can go on to win it, if this is going to help them to do that, a result like this.
Look, winning, of course, always does. I don't really want to take anything away from United, even though I could probably sit here for the next half hour and probably give you some facts of what this really means in terms of Manchester United, because they're no different than they were, I suppose. I mean, it's still a bad season. You know, I think of Manchester United to have these levels of concentration every game against the teams that allow you to win the championships, because that's the difference, right? I mean, of course, it's easy to get up for Liverpool. That's the game that everyone looks to. United have proven this season that they can do that, and I think for that you have to give them credit, because even though I can't remember what the shots were in the first leg, and it was embarrassing for Manchester United, just as it was against Manchester City, because that's not the sort of United you want to see. But in this particular one, it is Liverpool. It is on the way, perhaps, to a trophy. And so it's hard to take that away because, as Rob said, this was a weird game. And in terms of ebb and flow, I mean, just bad. And I don't think in a positive way in many ways. I mean, you look at the results and how it panned out. But for me, it wasn't a very good game. To me, it looked two teams that were absolutely spent at times, not just physically but emotionally as well in this game. But you know, can't take away from Manchester United, because ultimately, when I look deep down here, they had the better chances. They really had. And Rob, what was it, 95th minute? I mean, it was a 2-2. I mean, Rashford's got to put that away. He had a couple unbelievable chances, and we're not even looking at. I mean, we're still talking about a thriller, but not in extra time.
Do you feel, Rob, that people aren't giving Manchester United enough credit for this win?
No, I think they are. They're giving them the credit that they deserve in the areas that they deserve. I mean, they showed great character and great spirit. I mean, it's been a criticism that's been levelled at some of the players, not just this season, over the years since Sir Alex Ferguson retired, that United, you know, when things are going badly, they just down tools and they don't really care. Well, that wasn't really in evidence on Sunday, and Janusz is right, you know, but it is easier, you would think, to get up for a game against your arch rivals Liverpool in an FA Cup quarter final when there's possibly a trophy on the line. I think Janusz is right again, that there are still kind of vulnerabilities to the way that Man United play. I mean, if you replay that game again, maybe Liverpool take some of their chances or make the most of better opportunities in the second half, and the game at the end of 90 minutes is dead and buried, and United lose that game, you know, 3 or 4-1. They deserve credit for sticking in there. They were probably the better team in extra time. You have to give them credit for that. It took an awful lot of fortitude and energy to get them through that extra time period, to the point where, you know, in the last moments of the game, they've still got the energy, or two of them have got the energy to sprint the length of the field, Garnacho to Ahmad, and then Ahmad to have the composure to finish the game off in the way that he did. So you have to give them credit in that sense. I don't think that there'll be many Man United fans thinking, well, this is a turning point in terms of performances going ahead this season. They've still got some very, very big games to come in the Premier League this season, particularly against Liverpool at Old Trafford after the international break, in a repeat of that FA Cup quarter final. So I don't think Man United fans are possibly looking at it as this is a big turning point under Ten Hag. I think they're just kind of taking it for what it is. A really mad game, where they were fortunate enough to come out on the right side of it.
And the craziest part about this game is I was watching the extra time, and Liverpool was playing cat and mouse, but couldn't do anything. You can tell. I mean, making wrong decisions because there was nobody to put away. In a crazy thing that I thought about it, and hear me out here, because obviously they did it for the right reasons. But I think Jurgen Klopp, when he withdrew Salah early in the game, gave United life. Because I'm telling you, even if he just stood there, did nothing, and of course he probably needed to come off because he's been injured and all of that. They know exactly where he stands in terms of his fitness every second of the game. But I think United didn't worry about. There was a time where I think if I were Man United, if I was on that pitch and I was a player and I saw Salah going off, I'm saying nobody's going to score now. Really, and you could see that in stoppage time, even to a level where United were chasing the result. But at one point they played with Maguire. Just imagine if Klopp just left him there and say, you know what, just stand there, because just standing there you can still, play a quality ball, and obviously there's going to be so much space as it was on a counter against United. There's no possibility that Ten Hag goes back, even losing, goes to one. What was it? Harry Maguire in the end was the only center back. So this is how weird this game was. It's one of those where it's hard to really say anything about the state of Manchester United or Liverpool.
Yeah, and obviously we do talk about the future and how this game impacts it. And you just alluded to it there, Rob, saying that perhaps it's not the turning point for Erik Ten Hag. But what does it do for him? Like, does it buy him any time? Does it give him any grace? At this point, is there anything he could do to change things for what's ahead next season?
Yeah, I mean, it's a massive win in terms of what it means. I mean, you can go into details about how it was achieved and talk about the merits of that for as long as you want. But in terms of the actual result, it's huge, because ultimately Erik Ten Hag has got two things left to play for this season. It's the FA Cup and Champions League qualification. If they'd been beaten on Sunday, that would remove the chance of ending this season with a trophy. So it gives him life in the FA Cup and gives United the possibility of winning that FA Cup final. There are still massive question marks about whether Ten Hag is the right man to take this team forward next season. Obviously, United have got a new co-owner in Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who's assumed responsibility for the football side. He's making some very, very key appointments in different roles at the club. And at some stage, he's going to make a decision on what he wants to do with the manager. The messaging coming out of Ineos and Sir Jim Ratcliffe's camp is that they are going to look at Erik Ten Hag's reign as a whole and not base their decision on whether he can win the FA Cup this season or whether they can qualify for the Champions League. But it certainly does him no harm at all if he can capitalise on the win over Liverpool and get to the FA Cup final and win it, and also somehow find a way of clawing themselves back into the Champions League in the final 10 games of the season. So in terms of what it means for Ten Hag, it's massive, because if United had lost that game on Sunday, we wouldn't be sat here now talking about what a great game. We'd be sat here now talking about the possibility that Erik Ten Hag is going to get sacked, not just at the end of the season, but possibly even before it.
What are your thoughts on his future, Janusz?
Clean slate for me. I mean, Manchester United need that. They're doing it in the front office, behind the scenes, and everywhere else. And although I kind of understand that, I think I will not. For sure, I was singing praises, and Rob, you probably as well, in the first season. I don't necessarily remember too many great games that they've played in that season. I just don't like the fact that from an attacking-minded manager that he was at Ajax, everybody seems to be that way at that club. This is how he approaches times of trouble. Now, this is going to help him a little bit. It's going to buy him time, and perhaps maybe even stays. And once he gets the proper players, if he does, because I don't think there's that much wiggle room, and it's going to be this team's going to be changed. I look at the games that I've mentioned as Manchester City or Liverpool at Anfield, and even some of the games that he's lost, and even against weaker opposition, he's very, very pragmatic. And I think the world's going forward. I think the biggest teams in the world are there to entertain. I'm pretty sure that he wants to do that, but I'm starting to wonder if he is capable of that. He's too pragmatic. I think, there's almost, and I hate to say that because it's not true in my head as I say it, but I almost think that some of the games he's lost, I'd rather lose playing well than just kind of lose and then have that sort of, or even get a draw. Results are important, and I get that. That's why I'm fighting with myself here, because I never thought that as a player. But as an onlooker right now, when I look at this and I look at the gap that exists, I mean, even in this game, I mean, look how differently Klopp has dealt with his injury issues. The 5 academy players. I mean, he could have been pragmatic, but he never was. And I look at Ten Hag over and over and over again. And this team is just horrific in their defensive shape, and how they approach games, how they just never play on the front foot. And even in the times of trouble, as I've said, as I look at the best managers in the world, they don't go away from their philosophy. And it seems to me that for Erik ten Hag, it's an easy thing to do.
Just to wrap things up on Manchester United while we're here, Kobbie Mainoo's been handed his first England call-up, his first ever senior England call-up. Do you think this comes at a good time, Rob, for him? Obviously, with the Euros coming up in the summer, do you think that's what's getting looked at here?
I think so. I mean, to be honest, I expected Calvin Phillips to keep his place in that England squad. Once Calvin Phillips wasn't in it, I was very surprised that Kobbie Mainoo wasn't initially. Obviously, he's been called up today. I mean, there's a lot of Man United fans saying that Gareth Southgate suddenly, noticed Kobbie Mainoo because he was fantastic playing in that midfield against Liverpool. I don't think that is the case, really. You can make the argument that maybe it's a little bit too soon. He's only played 15 Premier League games. That obviously would be an awful lot more had he not been injured in pre-season. He had to wait a long time this season to get his opportunity. But I think Gareth Southgate has shown in the past that if you're good enough, you're old enough, and he certainly did that with Jude Bellingham, and that decision to fast track him into the senior squad has paid dividends. The other thing at play here is the fact that Kobbie Mainoo is eligible for Ghana, and Ghana have made no secret of the fact that they would like to have him in one of their squads. Maybe that's influenced Gareth's decision to call him up for these games against Brazil and Belgium. Whether he makes the Euro squad after that is another matter entirely. The squads for the major tournaments get reduced now from 26, which we saw in Qatar, to 23. So Gareth Southgate will only be taking 23 players to Germany. You can argue that if Calvin Phillips hasn't recovered any kind of form and he doesn't go, that Kobbie Mainoo is the natural replacement in that position. But again, that's a decision for Gareth Southgate. He's not massively blessed with a lot of players in that central midfield area, so you can understand why he wants to bring Kobbie Mainoo in, get him into St George's Park, have a proper look at him in training, and maybe give him a senior debut against Brazil or Belgium.
Yeah, but we obviously wish him the best of luck. And before we do put a bow on this time, we want to talk about the Liverpool perspective with you, Janusz. There is some saying that this is a blessing in disguise, and the fact that it does mean potentially a couple less fixtures for Jurgen Klopp. What are your thoughts on that take?
I think that's nonsense. I mean, there's trophy to be won. You want to take it. I mean, as they've mentioned, the fixture pile up and all of that, but that, of course, doesn't mean. I mean, you can argue that was, one of the most realistic trophies to win. I mean, Europa League is not going to be easy. Of course, Europe is never easy. But I sort of suspect that if you ask Jurgen Klopp, at the end of his career at Liverpool and in Premier League, as he states it, which trophy would he like to win more, the FA Cup or and perhaps in the final against Pep Guardiola, right? Or Europa League? I think he chooses FA Cup. So I don't buy into it. I think he recognizes that this was very close. This is a game that ultimately, regardless of who you think the better team was, I mean, they were in position to see this out and get to the, probably get to the final. They would have been favorites to get to the final, wouldn't they? Regardless of how the draw would have panned out for them. So no, I don't buy into it.
All right, let's move on to talk about one of the other games. It was Chelsea against Leicester. Chelsea made hard work of it, but obviously have booked their spot in the next round of the tournament. Rob, after the game, Pochettino's asked fans to trust him and the Chelsea project. Do you think that it's fair for him to ask that? Should Chelsea fans feel that they can trust him in the project right now?
And that's a great question. In terms of the cup competitions, obviously he's reached the Carabao Cup final. And he's into a semi-final of an FA Cup. Now, he made the point after that game that when he was at Southampton and when he was at Tottenham, everyone kept telling him, get to Wembley, get to Wembley, get to Wembley. And he's done it twice in his first season at Chelsea. But I don't think that Chelsea's form in the domestic cups is the issue here. The fact of the matter is, with no European football, no midweek games to kind of deny him time on the training pitch, his team, with 10 games to go, are only 11th in the Premier League. Now, that is not good enough. And I can understand Pochettino's frustrations that he's come in the summer to a club that's very much in transition. They've got issues with the squad. They had far too many players, that they've spent an awful lot of money in a little bit of a scattergun approach to recruitment. And Pochettino's been the man to be parachuted in and told, you have to sort that out. So I can understand his frustrations with that. But the fact of the matter is that he should have done an awful lot more with the players he had available than 11th in the Premier League table with 10 games to go. It may be that he ends this season with a trophy. I think they were very unlucky, or not unlucky. They should have won the Carabao Cup final against Liverpool, and they didn't. They may end the season with a trophy in the FA Cup, but ultimately he's going to be judged on Chelsea's performances in the Premier League. You know, you've got a similar situation at Spurs with Postecoglou. Again, no European football, and look what he's done with that Spurs team. You know, Pochettino can't match that achievement that Pochettino has managed with you could argue a weaker Spurs squad. So no, I think that he's under pressure at Chelsea. And I think there's a reason for that. He should have done far better in the Premier League.
Two questions for you, Janusz, as we finish this topic on Chelsea. Is Poch still the right man for the job? And if they don't win the FA Cup, is his job on the line?
I think it is. I mean, that's the only way. I mean, if he wins that, and even then, I think there's going to be a question. I don't think it's easy. Obviously, you have to agree to the structure there is there, right? Because now, I mean, you know, Todd Bowley, that to me is just a massive, massive failure. You don't have to be an accountant to know that by spending that much money, you're gonna be in trouble with financial fair play. Now we're reading that they're going to have a wholesale, and the same players that they bought, they're going to try to sell, or a number of players just to look. To me, it's very difficult to operate in that environment. It continues to show, of course, something that we knew, but never for sure, that Poch probably, you know, didn't choose half of these players, and if they're not you players. You know, it's difficult. And yet, you know, I still don't see really, truly any identity. I think it is getting better. I think I want to give him a little bit of credit because last few games, at least we've seen some players starting to perform really to the level that we expected. But even in this game against Leicester City, I mean, Chelsea should have been out of sight at some point, and yet they could kind of continue to let teams back. So I think it's going to be extremely, extremely difficult. In general, for Pochettino, under Todd Bowley and everybody else, that's going to be a project that may be going on forever. And I continue to think that this is Chelsea have become a financial vehicle rather than a sporting one.
Okay, let me stick with you, Janusz, because we're moving on to talk about City Newcastle. And I know Rob was there, so I've got another question for Rob right now. But in terms of this, what we're seeing with City at the moment is that they are cruising. Can you see them winning a back-to-back treble, Janusz?
Yes. Absolutely, I can. Although, see, and I guess it depends. Maybe Rob can help me with that. How you look at it, because they're nowhere near the quality that they showed last season. I think they have it. I mean, there's tons of talent, but I think still Pep Guardiola. Although we're starting to see maybe his best 11, but it wasn't as obvious as last season, where we knew exactly who's going to play for the biggest and most important games. I'm talking about Champions League and maybe the clashes against Liverpool and the one that's coming against Arsenal. We absolutely knew what was going to happen, right? With Mahrez in the league for the most part, and Bernardo Silva playing in the Champions League because of his defensive abilities. Here, it's not as much. So, you know, they're doing really well while not playing at their absolute best. Half full, half empty, I'm not so sure, but I'll tell you this, they're going to have to get a little bit closer to the levels we've seen last year in order to win it. But I absolutely think that they have the quality to do that.
What do you think of that, Rob? Obviously, being at the game, you saw this. And just to add, after your response to Janusz, if it is a back-to-back treble, is it more likely Pep walks after that?
I mean, to Janusz first, I completely agree. They haven't reached the levels that they did last season. I mean, the way that they blitzed Real Madrid in the Champions League at home last season was probably the best performance that I've seen from an English club in decades, and to reach that level, City have probably still got a way to go. What they've managed to do, though, is just stick in there, really. You know, sticking behind Liverpool and Arsenal in the race for the Premier League title. They've done enough to get through the Champions League and are also into the semi-finals of the FA Cup. Usually around this time of year, this is when we start to see City kick into gear. They've started to get key players back. You know, they've missed Haaland for a couple of months around Christmas time. De Bruyne was injured for 5 months. It's got a little bit of a groin injury now, but it's not meant to be serious, so he'll be back after the international break. John Stones has missed a couple of months, and now he's back. It really just feels like deja vu a little bit with City, that every year around sort of February, March, we just see Pep Guardiola's team click into gear and they go on these long winning runs. They just don't lose games in the season's running, and they just look like they're going to do that again. And I thought that on Saturday in the FA Cup. You know, it's a really big opportunity for Newcastle to win a trophy, a first trophy since 1955. And City didn't really have to get out of second gear. They kind of just sort of eased them aside as if they were a lower league side. And, you know, that's where we are with this City side. They're just so relentless in the way that they win games and chase trophies. And I just would expect them to do the same again. In terms of Pep's future, yeah, I mean, nothing would surprise me with Pep now, because, you know, we're into his 8th season. He doesn't tend to spend this long at clubs. So if he was to win the treble again, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he decided that he wanted to walk away. I was in a press conference in Saudi Arabia after City won the Club World Cup just before Christmas, and he walked in and started talking about how that was the end of a chapter, and that chapter was closed, and he'd won everything he wanted to win and achieved everything he wanted to achieve. And literally sat there in the front row of this press conference thinking that Pep Guardiola is going to resign as City manager right in front of me. You know, that's the kind of way he was speaking. Obviously he didn't, and he's going to see it out to the end of the season, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me if they were to win another treble or win the Champions League again, whether he just decides that, you know, he's done everything he wants to do at City and now is the time to leave. He's made no secret of his desire to manage a national team in the future. If he was to leave this summer, it would give you 2 years to prepare for the World Cup in the United States in 2026. You know, we are in that period of Pep Guardiola's career at City now where he will decide his own future. This isn't a case where City are going to say, no, you've got to stay and honour the last year of your contract. The decision will be left to Pep Guardiola. If he gets to the end of the season and thinks, you know, I've won everything, I've done it all, I'm feeling a little bit tired, I want a different challenge, it would not surprise me in the slightest if he was to walk away.
Yeah, mic drop. I mean, he has to. I mean, unprecedented in England if he does that. I mean, I'd imagine he'd be in the same position as Jurgen Klopp. I mean, do you want another cycle? I mean, there's going to be key players leaving. Bernardo Silva, some of these guys, and even, you know, even if you look at Haaland, I mean, the way he's being managed, I think he's going to move on sooner rather than later. I'm not saying next season, but it's going to happen. I don't know what's there to gain. You know, the crazy part of that is that if he was to stay and say next season he wins, I don't know, just the league, people are going to say that it's a failure. Or even if he wins FA Cup, and they truly would, right? I don't know how much there's to gain. His best coaches leave him season in, season out. That's credit to him, right? Because they go on to become very, very good coaches elsewhere. But that's not easy to deal for a manager, right? When your right-hand man goes every season. Now there's talk, Rob, I think, about Chiki Begiristan, right? Also possibly leaving. We know they've lost the CEO. I just think when he wins it, he just says thank you very much. See you later.
Yeah, he says, there you go. I'm done. Thanks so much. Anyway, we're going to let Rob go. Rob, it's been great to have you with us. Rob is actually going to be on ESPN FC tonight on the main show. So make sure to catch him. Stevie Nichol's on there as well tonight, I think. So get yourself prepared, Rob. All right.
I can only imagine the mood he's in. I can't wait.
Oh, yeah. I saw him on the day. Trust me, it wasn't a good one. Anyway, thanks for being with us. We'll speak to you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Janusz, we've got to talk about Barcelona because suddenly it looks as though things are getting a lot better. And it's funny because if you actually look at the stats, and we put this up at the weekend after their big win over Atleti at the Metropolitano as well, it actually shows that they haven't lost since Xavi. And they seem to be doing better. And Xavi announced, obviously, he's leaving at the end of the season. And they seem to be doing better. Some say it's not, you can't really pinpoint it to that. Others say maybe he is playing with a bit more freedom and with a bit less pressure on his shoulders. But something's definitely changed, hasn't it?
Well, of course. I mean, I'm not surprised at all. We see this with Bayern Munich and Thomas Tuchel. I mean, Jurgen Klopp is different because nobody wants him to leave. But of course, I think, you know, the extra pressure goes away. So I'll keep Klopp out of it. But when you look at Tuchel and Xavi in particular, I think players know that they have to take responsibility because now the press can get after Xavi. I mean, he's gone. Hey, you got what you wanted. You thought that wasn't good enough. And certainly in Spain and Catalonia, that was the case. Xavi is not experienced enough. He's not, he's too pragmatic, this, that, or the other, as you have mentioned. So I think that definitely helps because Xavi is going to say, what do you want from me now? These are the players that I have. I think there's a lot of players that are underperforming and, go on and you go on. But I think it's positive. We always knew there's talent. We always knew that there's so many young players that their time probably hasn't come, even though they show from game to game how capable they truly are, the 15, 16, 17-year-olds who are really helping Barca to be where they are. And you've mentioned the statistics.
Do you think they can win the Champions League, Janusz?
No, I mean, look, I mean, it's easier to do that than win domestic league. That is for sure. We've seen that, and with 2 games, who knows? I'm hesitant a little bit because the second legs, I think Barca in the next 2 games, if they get through, are at home, and I'm a big, they're very good at that anyway. But it's a big advantage. But no, I don't think that they are.
All right, so let me talk to you about Robert Lewandowski, because when we talk about the upturn in fortunes, he's definitely looking more like himself right now.
He is. It's no surprise. I don't think he was as bad as everybody were thinking, considering how Barcelona were playing, considering the sort of injuries, and you look at the team around him. He was, is, and will be their key man. When you think about a 36-year-old striker, I mean, his numbers are nowhere near to what he was, what it once was. But what's it? 13 goals, 8 assists, 3 goals and 1 assist in the Champions League. So yeah, that's not it. But I think what a player like that he needs structure. Why are we surprised that all of a sudden now he's kind of maybe not wandering around as much, although he had 2 great assists against Atleti, 2 wonderful crosses, of course scored. He doesn't venture into the midfield as deep as he once did, and perhaps there is a reason for that, because maybe the young Yamal has given him that width, and Rafinha has been looking a little bit better as well. And look, Robert Lewandowski is used to structure. And I don't say that just because he's Polish, and we all know that throughout history, structure was very important for players. But look at the structure he had at Bayern Munich. Look at the structure every striker had there. Now, we can easily say Harry Kane is wonderful, but is anyone surprised that he's scoring left and right? There's a certain structure, certain way of playing with Bayern Munich. Over the years, there's been some great strikers, the 4-2-3-1, where everybody works for that player for the most part. It's been a little bit different at Bayern right now, but that exists. So I think that's something that under Xavi, with this Barcelona, there was no structure. It was very difficult for a 36-year-old striker who's used to getting that service to do it. And that's why he kind of felt he always needed to do more, forgetting that he's best, 6, 7, 8, 9 yards away from goal.
Okay, well, time will tell. We've got a very interesting end to the season in all of the top leagues right now, and you can always follow along with everything that's happening on ESPN FC and here on ESPN FC Live on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Fridays. We are always happy to have you with us. But for now, we're going to say goodbye.